Hi, let's chat about a market update today. So I was lucky enough to go to RVAR yesterday and deliver, or I guess day before yesterday, and deliver the market update for the president's update. And I was gobsmacked to see that the average sale price of a home last month was over $304,000. So that is up 10% over July last year. So we have seen a 10% increase in value on the average sale price of homes since this time last year. That is incredible. Now, at face value, that is excellent news because that's what we want. These are homes are people's very, very best investment. Oftentimes, most of the general public, this is the largest investment they will ever make in their lifetime. So for it to increase in value by 10% over 1 year is incredible. Now, it does beg the question, is that sustainable? No. If houses go up in value 10% every year, no one will be able to afford a house ever again. So it is not sustainable. It is, however, in my opinion, good news for the homeowners. This now puts equity in their home. It now allows them some more borrowing power if they wanted to refinance or they wanted to take out a home equity line of credit. Those appraised values then have support from the neighborhood for sales, and that will allow a lot of homeowners to access the equity in their home. So maybe now they're able to put some money towards their kids' college, remodel a bathroom, put on an addition, do some of the things around their home that they need to do. So good news, in my opinion. Sustainable? Heck no. We cannot go up in value 10% every year because your home will eventually outpace your income. So if people can't make income to afford homes that have gone up in value 10% every year, then people can't move. So at that point, it wouldn't matter that you've got a pile of equity in your home if you can't find someone to buy your home so you can buy another home. And if you can't afford the home you're wishing to move to. So I don't look for this to be like this forever. I think it's a product of the market we've been in for the last year and a half, where folks are just, the low inventory has driven people to pay more for homes than in the past. And they have been able to borrow money very, very inexpensively. So when you can borrow money really cheap, like 3%, and there's low inventory, so you're going to have to be at the whim of the market and pay more than you would normally in a more balanced market, then that is a recipe for people to pay more for homes. So in my opinion, what we're seeing with that number from last month is we're seeing the result of all of those new higher appraisals. So we have been talking about for 6 months, record-breaking sale prices for 6 months. Well, that is going to that's going to impact the average sale price of the home on the market. So that is what we are now seeing. So I think that's predictable. I don't think it'll go on forever. I also touched on Dr. Lawrence Yune's, he's the National Association of Realtors economic advisor, and Dr. Yune was saying that he looks for next year's market to be not up, not down, just the same, which I'll take stable, even if it's not, even if we don't have more inventory, stable is still good. He doesn't look for numbers to be up or down, just the same. And Roanoke is always a little more insulated from change, from the high swings of the highs and the lows. So even though he was reporting numbers a little more volatile for the year to date right now, ours were not as volatile. Our swings are much more narrow, and they always have been. We are not like those bigger markets like California and New York and Florida. So that's good. I sometimes complain that change gets here a little slowly here in Roanoke, but by the same token, change happens a little slowly too. So in terms of things like unbalanced markets and low inventory, I'd rather us be a little slow in that change coming here. So I don't look for inventory to shake loose anytime soon. There's not enough new construction. There are not enough existing homes on the market. We still have not enough homes. If you take a pad of paper and you write down all your upcoming seller clients on one side and all of your buyer clients on the other side, I guarantee you every single one of you has a very uneven looking list. You probably have 6 to 7 buyers to every seller on your list. So still good news for sellers. I do not believe that the sellers have missed the market. I don't believe, with the exception of some very, very premium type homes, I do not believe sellers are now going to realize, 30 to 40% more money when they sell their home than they would be getting otherwise, because people were just getting absolute stupid amounts of extra money for their homes 6 months ago, 4 months ago. But now that the interest rates have scooted up just a little bit, buyers are being a little more selective about how much they're going to pay for the home. They're being a little more selective about how high that escalation amount is going to go. So they're just being a little more careful with their money because now their money is costing more. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I would love to see interest rates just settle down at a nice 5% and let's just chug along like that for a long time. But we'll see what the Feds decide to do. There has been talk about them going up again. We'll see if that happens. And if they do go up again, we're realtors, we'll just roll with it. So inventory, in my opinion, is not going to get better, not for a while. Building material cost has come down some, but is still not where people can build confidently right now. Folks who are building a home right now are folks who had plans to build a home and nothing's going to get in their way and they're going to build that home. A lot of people who were possibly electing to build a home are reconsidering. It's just costing more to build a home. The interest rates are not as great as they were 6 months ago. And so that is causing some people to pump the brakes. So while that's happening, we are still going to have low inventory. What piece of the puzzle am I missing? Realtors are still at an all-time high. We've got a lot of realtors. Anytime the market is hot, lots of people get into this industry, or lots of people reactivate their license. If you have been in this a while, you understand that there are ebbs and flows in this industry, and that you just have to continue to evolve and continue to educate your sellers and your buyers. So if you have not already sent out a message to all of your buyers that perhaps were unsuccessful this last year trying to secure a home, you should reach out to them. Even if you write one email and you blind carbon copy all of them, just to say, hey, just wanted to check in on you. As we get into the fall, I'm going to continue to work for you and continue to help you find a home. But I just wanted to give you a brief little market update. Interest rates have risen, but they are still an affordable rate. We have seen interest rates double and triple the current interest rate historically, and people still bought homes. We just may need to be more selective about the home you're going to purchase. Good news. We're seeing price reductions in listings. We're seeing homes stay on the market a little longer. We're seeing sellers being willing to pay some closing costs on behalf of the buyer. Those were things that we did not have access to for the last year. Sellers were saying, nope, bring me cash or go away. And because of that, it really discouraged a lot of buyers who were in the marketplace. So I think there is now a place for those buyers to come back in. And my biggest hope is that the buyers who come back into the market are the ones that have a home to sell. So if you had a home to sell first, you weren't buying a house this past year because you weren't going to find someone who was willing to let you have a subject to sale contingency. So my biggest hope now, because I think this would significantly help the inventory shortage, is if we can get back into a market where sellers are willing to accept a buyer who has a house to sell first. Well, that's going to be a whole swath of homes going on the market and being made available that have not been available for the last year. My last concern about this market is more of a long-term projection. I am growing worried that the low interest rates that we all secured are going to dissuade people in 3 to 5 years from selling their house. I'm worried that, so take me for example. I jumped on the opportunity to refinance, even though my mortgage was only 6 years old. I jumped on the chance to refinance. And we went ahead and opted to go to a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage. Now, some of that was me feeling like in 15 years, I will finally have all my kids out of the house, right? Because y'all know I've got them from 22 down to 10. So in 15 years, I should be done paying for children, raising children, all of that. And wouldn't it be nice if I didn't have a mortgage anymore? So maybe I can buckle down for 15 years and get this done. But really, what really pushed us into a 15-year mortgage was that we could get a 2.75 interest rate for a 15-year mortgage. It was going to be higher if we did a 30-year mortgage. Well, because the interest rate was significantly better than what we had, it really didn't make that monthly payment all too terribly more. So we decided just to try to dedicate ourselves to doing that. But now I've got a 2.75% interest rate. Why would I want to voluntarily give that up and go to a 5 or a 6% interest rate? So I think there are a lot of people who have a 3% interest rate now on a 30-year mortgage, or a 3.25% interest rate over 30 years, and they are going to be hard pressed to make a decision to move. They may instead put on an addition, take out a home equity line of credit, but I'm worried that they may not want to give up that very low interest rate. So just another perhaps wrinkle in the low inventory situation is that if people aren't going to move around, our industry is built on people moving. So we need them to move around. We need them to see that new shiny and it works better for their family and want to move. So we will just see. Anybody have any questions? I'd like to open it up to your opinions, your thoughts, your questions. Let me know what you're thinking. And since we're recording, if you would just keep names and things out of it, that would be great. Anybody? Okay, y'all know I can just keep talking. So we're going to go over wholesaling. So I wanted to talk about what wholesaling is. You know you're going to get my candid opinion on wholesaling. Wholesaling is a real estate technique where a wholesaler identifies a property that they believe they can buy low and sell high. And what they do is they identify the property, they contact the seller, and they ask the seller if the seller would consider selling them the home. Most often, they are buying that home below market value. In fact, a wholesaler can't make money unless they purchase the home below market value. Now, the perks that are spun to the seller are, it'll be as is. Perhaps I'll pay you to leave, called cash for keys. You know, I'll pay you $2,500 for your moving expenses if you go ahead and sell me this house. Usually a quick sale. But when you are wholesaling, that wholesaler is not actually taking ownership of the property. What they're doing is they are securing a contract, and there is always a termination right built into it, so that that wholesaler can get out if they can't secure another buyer for that property. So if I'm the wholesaler, I'm going to Rita and I'm saying, Rita, will you sell me your house below market value? Don't touch a thing. I don't care that the dishwasher doesn't work. And Rita says, well, that'd be great because XYZ reasons I need to sell my house. And Rita, unfortunately, probably is not reaching out to someone to determine the actual value, the market value of her home. So she enters into a contract with me, the wholesaler. And me, the wholesaler, is going to go try to secure another buyer. So the wholesaler is going to go out, they're going to advertise it all over Facebook forums, all over private Facebook groups to investors. They're going to be looking for someone who wants to buy their contract option. And go ahead, Rita.
Well, I'm going to say this goes on all the time in Texas, or it did after the flood. It's ridiculous because you don't know if you're going to closing or not. You don't know if the next buyer, you have to change all your contracts at the very last minute. You don't know if they're qualified or not unless they're cash buyers and they show you up. It's very upsetting for a seller to find out that the person who just bought their house as a wholesaler is not going to be the one buying the house. It seems like a swindle to the sellers, and they do come to realtors too. So it's not like they go without us. No, they try to come through you, and a lot of them don't tell the truth. They don't say, "Well, I'm a wholesaler. Here's what I want to do. I want to be able to transfer the title." You know, I think it's bad business.
So there is, I would say, in defense of wholesaling, under the right circumstances, it could get a seller out of a sticky situation if they have gotten themselves perhaps into a potential foreclosure situation, but at the end of the day, and it does, if you're wholesaling, it can be less expensive on the front end for the seller because there are no realtor fees. However, the question is, could realtors being involved realize more proceeds for that seller? Could they sell that home for more on behalf of the seller? So I'm a realtor. I obviously believe that we have value. I obviously believe that we have our fingers on the pulse of what market value is, that we can realize the most money possible for our seller because we work for our seller. Wholesalers do not work for the seller. Wholesalers are hoping to secure a contract with a blanket termination right in it so they can get out if they cannot secure another buyer. And then they're looking to assign that contract to another buyer for a fee. So the wholesaler has had no exposure. They have spent some time and energy on the transaction, but they have not taken ownership of the property. They have not paid any closing costs, and they have made a fee from the buyer to assign the contract to them. Now, all of this is legal. Whether it's predatory or not is another matter. Whether it's moral or not is another matter. But you have to remind yourself that wholesaler does not work for that seller. So it is not illegal. Things I would like for you to watch out for, just because maybe a wholesale opportunity is the best thing for your seller. Maybe it isn't, but they should have all the facts. They should know what it is they're participating in as a seller. So one thing to watch for is we do have that line on our purchase agreement that states, will this contract, it will be or it will not be assignable. If it says will be assignable, that means that buyer can assign that contract to anyone they wish. They cannot change the terms of that contract, but they can assign it to anyone they want. And now that is who you're closing with. And in a state and on a contract where our closing date is on or about a closing date, it could mean a delay with no penalties to that buyer, because there is an on or about functionality of our closing date. So a delay because they're assigning it to a new buyer will not necessarily be a breach of contract. So I just want to educate y'all on what wholesaling is. Also, many of our agents have experiences with working with a buyer who wants to see all sorts of properties and wants to make very, very low offers on these properties, but also has really strong opinions about how the contract wording needs to be, including some sort of very easy termination right. You need to talk to your buyer if this is the case. Hey, buyer, I work for you. I need to know what we're doing here. Are we wholesaling? Is that what we're trying to do? And if it is, you need to decide if that's work you want to be engaged in, because it can mean a lot of work on your end that may not result in a closed transaction, because they may go through 10 or 15 of those, terminating each one if they can't secure a buyer. So you do deserve to know what type of business they are trying to do, to know whether you're going to be able to fulfill your obligations to them, whether you want to work on 15 transactions with them, whether you want to be making offers 50% below list price or 75% below list price over and over again in the market. You don't have to work for everybody, but these are questions you should be asking up front. You know, hey, the home we're looking for you, will you be living in this home? You know, ask a few questions. If you hear things that are giving you pause and you're going, that's strange, or I've never heard that answer before, just call me and we can kind of work our way through it. Perhaps you don't want to work with that buyer. Perhaps you do, but you just need to have the right mindset, right? So, and Rita is correct. A lot of them, well, because there are a lot of conferences and conventions and workshops that people can go to learn how to do wholesaling. I feel confident they're being told to kind of keep the realtor in the dark, because otherwise, why would a buyer's agent work with you if you say, hey, listen, it may take 20 properties, but I promise you I'm trying to buy something? Why would the realtor say, no, I'd love to spend my time, energy, and gas money on that? Probably they wouldn't. So just being candid, again, when you sit down with that buyer and you decide whether y'all want to work with each other, it is a two-way street. Do they want to work with you, and do you want to work with them? Don't sign that exclusive right to represent buyer agreement with them if you've decided maybe I don't want to work with them. You know, any questions about that, about wholesaling? And I will say, I have seen a wholesale opportunity on our MLS. And I'm going to talk to the MLS board of directors at our meeting tomorrow about it, about whether a wholesaler has the right to sign a listing agreement and put it on the MLS or not. I am not convinced they do. So maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but I'm gonna spitball it tomorrow and see what my colleagues think about whether that is a allowable listing on the MLS or not. Okay, questions? Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. I'd love to talk to you about how we're seeing this new purchase agreement rolling out. Most everybody's got a handle on it by now. It is a little, it's a big elephant to eat in one bite. So we have had a few hiccups where agents are like, but I don't understand. I checked the box for visual septic inspection. So that's the only inspection they're having, right? No, if they checked 14A, that it is contingent upon inspections, the buyer is allowed to have any and all inspections they wish to have. That could be a mold test. That could be a camera down the sewer line. That could be an air quality test. That could be a lead-based paint test. That could obviously be a home inspection, a radon inspection. It could be a roof inspection. They can have a roofer come out and check on the roof. Any and all inspections the buyer wishes to have. Septic just happens to be its own little section, or it's not even its own section. It's just an extra detail on septic, because septic could be a very invasive inspection. You take the cap off the sewer main and run a camera down there, that is not invasive. You're going to put the cap back on. You bring a backhoe and dig up the distribution box to try to do a visual inspection of it, that is invasive. So it just was an option to try to put the seller on notice that there may be an invasive form of the septic inspection, or there's not going to be an invasive inspection of the septic system. But if you check that box in 14A that you're going to have this, that, and the other type of septic inspection, that's not a checklist of the inspections you're going to have. That's just an extra detail on septic. If 14A says is contingent upon inspections, it is any and every inspection the buyer may wish to have. Okay. The other thing, another little caveat on that is we're not going to identify the types of inspections. Okay. We've already seen one come across my desk where they used page 1 of the purchase agreement where we list addenda, like we're going to have a subject to suitable housing, we're going to have, or subject to sale, we're going to have a residential property disclosure form, we're going to have a lead-based paint form. They used those check boxes to say termite inspection, septic inspection. We're not trying to squeeze in the inspections that the buyer wants to have. It is just a blanket right for the buyer to have any and all inspections they wish to have. Okay. We are also seeing conflicting language. The whole point of having 14A, B, and C was so that we weren't having to write into additional terms section things like as is, but with inspections. You don't need to write in as is, but with inspections. What you would need to do is check 14A, strike 14B, and check 14C. And I already sent you guys a quick tip exactly explaining how to structure that on this new purchase agreement. So resist the urge to write in additional terms section. You know, we saw one a couple of weeks ago that was like, additional terms section said seller and buyer agree that inspections are for buyer's knowledge only, but agree that if major things are found, seller will fix. What? I mean, are y'all trying to get me in a fight with another broker? Who decides what's major? Who decides the threshold of repairs the seller's required to do? What if it's a gigantic foundation issue? Now the seller has to fix it? So please resist the urge to write in additional terms section. If you need to write into the additional terms section, just shoot it over to me or Jennifer. Text, email, whatever you need to do, shoot it over to me. Let me give it a thumbs up. Most often I will say, please add this last little bit, which is something to the effect of, you know, if no meeting of the minds can be established by the 3rd business day, seller and purchaser agree to release each other and refund the earnest money deposit to the purchaser. We've got to do that last half of the thought. Okay. Miki, you have a question? Yes, please. Or something to add?
Yes, I do. I actually just received one and we went back and forth with the purchase agreement because obviously I was representing the seller and it was an as is, seller to make no repairs. And I just want to see how this contract was supposed to have been written out.
Okay.
So 14A was not contingent on inspections. 14B was crossed out. 14C was not applicable. But then in additional terms, it says buyer will conduct a home inspection for informational purposes and ask seller to complete a termite inspection at the seller's expense, which was fine. Home is being sold as is with no repairs.
Okay. So this is what I'll say to that, Miki. The way that is written, that buyer has absolutely no termination right.
Yep.
If that buyer goes in there and they are not pleased with that home inspection report, my opinion is too bad.
Right.
But you tell that to the buyer once they've seen the home inspection report. That is what becomes a problem, you know, is they know what they're signing, but then when it doesn't work for them later, they don't like that. And, you know, I have had some very frustrated buyers call me over the last 6 months, basically saying, yeah, but we didn't know that. Well, that's why we're having the home inspection. Please stop waiving home inspection rights. Please stop saying that they're for informational purposes only. What are you doing with that information except to freak out about the property? You know, if it's fine and they go, all right, looks okay, and we move to closing, great. But what if it doesn't? What if they see something that gets them a little squirrely? They're not going to be happy when they ask their broker and their agent and the buyer's agent and the broker say, I'm so sorry, it's for your informational purposes only. It's as is, no repairs. There is no termination right there. So that was the whole point of adding 14C, which is, okay, well, maybe sellers don't want to give buyers just a walk, but at least maybe they could offer the buyer a walk during the inspection period, but don't leave and dump a whole bunch of inspection reports on the seller. So satisfy yourself in 10 business days that you still want to buy this house. Now, the seller on the one you just described, Miki, is going to have a hard time understanding if that buyer wants to walk. And unfortunately, it still exists in our industry that buyers think the only thing they have at risk is their earnest money deposit. That is simply not true. I would argue that's going to be the least amount of skin they can get away with. If the buyer were to, if the seller were to agree to release them at all. It can go to court. It can, and buyers can lose. We don't like that. But unfortunately, every time I've been in one of those sticky situations, it is always about what was written in the additional terms section.
So I guess my question is, because I am representing the seller, I'm not representing the buyer. I mean, is this contract fine to be written that way if I'm representing the seller? I mean, because she doesn't want to make any repairs and she
Yes.
wants, okay.
What I would say to you is you need to manage your client's expectations.
Right.
Which is, seller, this is what this says, but in my experience and my broker's experience, buyers can still get squirrely later, and we've got to decide, maybe we want a larger earnest money deposit. Maybe we want, maybe we just want to communicate, and maybe Miki, you want to send a email to that buyer's agent to say, listen, to be clear, this is how I have explained this to my seller. There will be absolutely no termination right on behalf of this buyer in regards to the home inspection report, the termite report, and my seller will be making 0 repairs regardless of the results of these inspections. And I would say, please respond to my email establishing that you understand that there is 0 termination right in regards to these inspections. Because later when the buyer says, well, but you can't expect us to buy it because of XYZ discovery, it needs to be very clear that y'all were very forthcoming with the expectations that we're not hiding anything. You have chosen to make this not contingent upon inspections.
Okay.
We're happy to let you have inspections, but you are saying, buyer, that you don't care what those results say, you will go to closing anyway.
So if I was on the other side and I was representing the buyer and it was an as-is house for sale, I would I select not contingent on inspections for A? And I'm just asking what's the best way. And I apologize, my allergies are tearing me to pieces this morning. So 14A would be not contingent. Cross out 14B and then put 14C as applicable to give them a way to walk away if the inspections were.
My counsel to my sellers, when they want as is with inspections, when the seller says, I'm not making any repairs, I don't care if they have an inspection, but I'm not making repairs. And I just did one of those because it was an estate. It was a listing for an estate. What I counseled my seller, the executor, on was, we don't want reports, okay? Because we don't want a bunch of disclosure obligations. The ladies lived in this house 45 years. But I see no point in holding somebody to the property if they don't want to be there. So would you agree with me, seller, that any contract we accept is going to be 14A, not contingent upon inspections, 14B, strike it completely. And I'm okay with I think 14A, Miki, may need to be is contingent upon inspections, because it is, because they are going to have a termination right through 14C. So I would structure it as 14A, it is contingent upon the buyer having inspections. 14B, though, I'm going to strike that because we're not going to renegotiate. We're not going to have repairs. You're not going to provide me reports. And 14C would be is applicable, that buyer may terminate during the inspection period, but do not give me any reports because I'm the listing agent and I don't want to burden myself and my seller with disclosure obligations. So what I'm going to counsel my seller on is that's cool that you want to sell it as is. And that's cool that you don't want to make any repairs. But I think it is silly to think someone is going to buy that property knowing nothing about it and with no regard to what the reports may say. So let's, instead of saying as is with no repairs and no termination right, let's give them a termination right. Let them go. Let's secure a new buyer and keep trucking.
So if you give them a termination right with 14C,
yes,
who is entitled to keep the earnest money deposit if that house has been off the market for a certain amount of time?
the buyer is.
Okay, so the buyer gets it back in C.
The buyer gets it back. Now in North Carolina, they have an actual due diligence contract, and there is a due diligence fee. So there is, say, an earnest money deposit, but then there's also a due diligence fee, and the seller gets to keep the due diligence fee if the buyer elects to terminate. That may eventually become an iteration we see here. I don't know. You know, our market, our buyers don't always have a lot of cash. So to come up with down payment, due diligence fee, and earnest money deposit, that may be too burdensome for a lot of buyers. So we'll just see how that comes to our marketplace, or if it comes to our marketplace.
And B and C cannot both be completed. It needs to be one or the other.
Well, B and C can both be in place. Let's look at it this way. I say 14A, it is contingent upon inspections. 14B, we will renegotiate when it comes to negotiating repairs. And 14C is applicable. What that means is buyer may use 14C and terminate before the deadline is done, before the inspection deadline is done. But if they don't, they move on to 14B. They provide reports. They provide a repair addendum, and they ask the seller to address repairs. And then we're going to renegotiate in accordance with 14B about those repairs for X numbers of business days. And at the conclusion of that renegotiation period, the buyer has a 2-day termination right if we've not been able to agree upon the repairs. So I most often want to write for my buyers a 14A is contingent, 14B intact, 14C is applicable. That's the holy grail for my buyer, because now they have a termination right if they just get squirrely during the inspection period, or if they see a house down the street that comes on the market that they like more, right? But if those inspections discover things that we want the seller to address, we get to renegotiate for repairs. And if the seller won't address them, or we can't agree and we can't come to a meeting of the minds, my buyer can then terminate with 14B. So for me, that's my favorite style of using this contract for a buyer.
Gotcha. Okay.
But
Thank
you
you.
have to get a seller to accept all that.
Yes. You have to
Right.
be in a market where the seller says, okay, we'll let you have a blanket termination right, and we'll even talk to you about repairs. You know, that we're not in that market right now, with the exception of homes that have maybe been a little bit aged on the market, you know, or for whatever reason, a little less desirable. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyway, that's what I've been seeing with the new purchase agreement.
Can I have